Welcome to another episode of Talking with Kevin and Son, where this is brought to you by RMK Productions and the 10 United Podcast Network. Our mission is to uplift, inspire, share stories and experiences using using the framework of teaching, learning, and modeling. I will tell you one thing about our guests coming up, and listen to this and remember this quote. The most courageous act is still to think for yourself out loud. And when I introduce our very special guest, you will find out that Miss Keisha Hawkins was a financial consultant or is a financial consultant with a perfect credit score. She's a graduate from Norfolk State University with a bachelor's in science. She's also a graduate of Troy State University with a master's in public administration. When you hear a story about how she got into it, you're going to be wowed. When you hear a story about her legacy with her son, Malik Hawkins, you're going to be wowed. When you hear about her as a mother, a wife, and a humanitarian, because that's what I'm calling her today, because she has created a program that allow your child, my child, your neighbor's child, an opportunity to find out the little nuggets that'll give you the roadmap, singularly, to a full ride. I want to welcome today our honored guest and my friend, Miss Keisha Hawkins. Welcome to Talking with Kevin and Son. How you doing?
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate you having me. Good afternoon. I think we're afternoon now. Morning is gone.
Yes,
Nice
yes,
to
yes,
be on the show.
yes.
Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, no problem. I'm going, since I know you get up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, because I've heard many of your interviews. You showed up for someone. I may have to test that friendship and see how far I can push it.
Don't do it, Kevin. Don't do it.
Well, let me dive in because I want people to hear your story on how you came about that. We want to talk a little bit about Malik and you as a mother, but roadmap to a full ride. We're talking about setting up preparations of getting financial assistance and providing our children, especially our Black and Brown children, with the opportunity to have a higher education or secondary education. Do me a favor, let's talk about what is the roadmap to a full ride?
So, Roadmap to a Full Ride was founded by me in 2019, where I saw there was a desperate need for families to be able to maneuver through the entire college process. I found that a lot of parents didn't understand the application process. They didn't understand how to find scholarships, didn't know where to go to look for scholarships, didn't understand, what essays and things would be required for admission to colleges and universities, as well as essays and things that would be necessary in order to be able to obtain scholarships. So I originally started out just kind of assisting family and friends and a lot of Malik's friends who were journeying through the process with him. And they started saying, wow, Keisha, I mean, like you are just so knowledgeable. You've helped me so much. And maybe you should just open a business. And so I got to thinking about it because at the time I was actually working full time for the federal government as a contracting officer. So I started out part time running my business. And just recently, October of 2021, I decided I was going to do early retirement from the federal government after almost 23 years as a contracting officer. And so now here I am running Roadmap to a full ride on a full-time basis.
All right. Real quick, we're going to go through this. How do people get in touch with you?
All right. So I do have an official website. It is roadmap2fullride.com. Roadmap2fullride.com. If you can't remember that, you can just go right in Google and put in Roadmap to a Full Ride. I am the first person that comes up. My website comes up right there. But I can also give you my phone number and my email address, which can also be found directly on my website. So my phone number is 757-797-6049. 757-797-6049. And my email is info@roadmap2fullride.com. Again, that's info@roadmap2fullride.com.
All right. So let's go back to roadmap with a full ride. So let's break this down for families, because a lot of times parents don't start thinking about secondary education until it's almost time for them to graduate
Right.
from high school, and we
Mhm.
need to start out early, because I know other families or people that look different from us start the planning stages from the time the child comes out of the womb. For some reason, we do not look at college as another opportunity, other than just getting our kids through the process of primary, elementary, and then high school graduation. And then when the conversation comes up, for most of us, it's too late and our options are limited. So
Right.
if I was a parent and I was sitting across from you, I've got a 2-year-old child. When is the appropriate time to talk about preparing for college, how to obtain scholarships? What about conversations of solidifying admissions to the schools of your choice? And how does the roadmap to a full ride enter into that conversation?
So I typically tell parents, when I'm doing interviews, that the perfect time to honestly start preparing is right around sixth grade, middle school. At that particular juncture, that's the opportunity where children can actually start taking honors classes and things of that nature that can give them high school credit. Because now the conversation is advanced studies diploma versus regular diploma, which is a whole nother conversation. However, if you're going to be pursuing an advanced studies diploma, that's where you start accumulating credits starting in middle school. So sixth grade is the great opportunity to go ahead and start getting started on the your roadmap. And so, what does a roadmap entail? It entails figuring out what classes your child needs to be taking to ensure they're competitive. It entails tapping into what their hobbies and resources and talents are, so that you can make sure you're paying attention to those things, because there are scholarships out there for things of that nature. And then it also starts tracking the process of when you should apply to colleges, what is required to get to your top college choices, what scholarships are available, what are legitimate scholarship websites. It's like a whole gamut, and some people think you just wake up one day and then here comes Publishers Clearinghouse saying your kid has a full ride. And that's not how it works. It truly is a process, it's a journey that you have to work on together with your child. And I often say, even though Roadmap to a Full Ride is my baby and it is for kids who are planning to go the traditional 4-year route, I also like to tell parents 4-year traditional may not be what your child wants to do, and that's perfectly okay. But that's why it's you should have those conversations early. Start talking about what they're interested in, what their hobbies are. Because at the end of the day, what they want to do is basically on them. Just because you wanted your kid to be an engineer doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be an engineer. They may want to be a truck driver or a barber or a cosmetologist, things of that nature. There are trade schools and other things like that the children can get involved in and still be successful. So, roadmap to a full ride is just one way. If you have a child who you believe is going to be focused on going to college, they've already shown an interest, and you guys are starting to build out your plan so you can ensure that your child not only gets into the college of their choice, but they get into the college of their choice, matriculate through for free. So that's pretty
Now,
much what roadmap to a full ride is.
now you've mentioned when parents identifying their child having interest in college. A lot
Right.
of a lot of families are families that don't have what we call a family dynamic setup. There's a mother, single, just getting
Mm-hmm.
by, struggling, keeping a roof over her head, keeping her kids fed, and they're single fathers that have now inherited the responsibility of raising their child as solo, be it because of failed relationships, loss of life, or whatever the case may be. And there are many families out there that are raising their nieces and nephews, or their grandparents are raising grandkids. So
Right.
a lot of times, for like people such as you and I, we do not have that conversation of a secondary education. We're just kind of getting by. We're overwhelmed with the system of our formal education at that time. We're learning to read and write along the same lines of our children, and that's the reason why shows, are you smarter than a fifth grader? More adults tuned in to see if they still had it. And there's also shows like Gordon Ramsay, the little chefs, and you've got talent. You see all these little kids doing these phenomenal things, and you sit there
Right.
in your living room, you look over at your kid and going, okay, how come my kid's not doing that? How do you identify um, a collegiate talent in a sixth grader when he's just wanting to survive and get his homework on time? How do you have that conversation, and how do you identify forecasting their future to a child that's not quite even a teenager yet?
Well, I think the biggest thing is exposure. So, we start exposing our kids to different things, even things that we didn't have. Because I would think as a parent, our objective should be to make sure our kids are better off than we were. So, as a parent, sometimes we have to tweak our parenting skills a little bit. But if you're a parent that's totally paying attention, you can tell very early on if your kid is going to be a academic child, or a child is very inquisitive, or a child that wants to try new things. And as a parent, it's your goal because you're supposed to be your child's first advocate, exposing them to different things. I would honestly say exposure is key because kids don't always know what they want to do. You have some kids who just know, but other kids, they don't really know, and that's why you have to expose them to different things. Like, for example, one of the first sports that kids can play is soccer, as early as 3 or 4 years old. Well, they may not like soccer, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't introduce them to it. And then if they don't like that, introduce them to something else, and you try something else, and you try something else, and eventually something's going to click. They may find it they like golf or swimming, but the whole point is just being able to expose our children, give them a better life than what we had, an opportunity to have a better life than what we had, even if we're not doing that great ourselves. There are so many resources out here that can help single parents make sure that their kids have the same opportunities as other children. And to be quite honest, if you're in a lower tax bracket, there are a lot of resources out there that can get you in places that a middle class family can't even get their kids into without having to pay a significant amount of money. So I think it's all about getting yourself connected to the right people with the right resources. And I always say it's not knowledge is power, it's applied knowledge is power. Because if you're adding tools to your toolbox and you never use them, then what good are they anyway? So I think if we are being intentional, if we're being intentional, we're paying attention to our children, we're giving them exposure, I think you'll be able to discover very early on if this is going to be a child, it's going to probably more than likely go the traditional 4 year route, someone who wants to get involved in a trade or things of that nature. Because at the end of the day, once again, it has to be their journey to travel as to what they want to get involved in so that they can be happy and successful.
Wow. And I will say to my listeners, part of the reason, there's two parts of the reason that I've invited Mrs. Hawkins, to be a guest, because I want to educate not only our people, but I want to educate the world and have them have access to an extremely talented person. And the reason why I'm saying this is because as a financial consultant, I said this when I was going through sports, when athletes were hiring agents. If you are hiring an agent based on reputation and your agent's broke, ask yourself, how is he going to make sure that you're
Right.
financially successful afterwards? And Keisha Hawkins has a perfect credit score as a financial consultant. And I'm also going to tell you, and I'm going to let her tell you, okay? Every company, big, small, or indifferent, every company starts out with their very first client. And I want you to share the story of your first client on Roadmap to a Full Ride. Did I say that right?
You said roadmap to a full ride. Who was my first client? Well, my first,
Malik. Malik.
yes, I was going to say, my
I was
first
gonna say,
non-paying client. My first
yeah.
non-paying client.
Hey, that was your first guinea pig. It's like, who do I work on first? Let me see if I got my stuff done. Because no one's going to follow someone that has not already paved the trail for them. That's the reason why when you talk
Right.
about footprints in the stand, don't follow someone that's lost. Follow someone to a destination that's been there, and they'll show you a better
Right.
way to get there. And that's the reason why I want to say, when you talk about Malik, $1.2 million in financial offerings. Now, the one thing that out of all your interviews, we've never asked who were making the offerings, and I'm going to address that. So if you don't mind telling me, how you set that up with your own son, because he was already on a full ride scholarship to life as an actor at, I think he wasn't even 2 years old when he got his first movie role.
18 months. 18
And,
months old.
and now he's a social media sensation. He is going to North Carolina A&T. He's a junior with a 4-point grade point average and killing it. He's still doing music. He is a motivational speaker. I mean, you're talking about a parent that can sit back and boast and say, damn, I got a great son. He's a great example. But I always know that when the apple falls from the tree, you have to consider where the apple, the source from where the apple fell. Sometimes
True.
it doesn't always fall from your tree, but it finds growth and stimulation in a tree that's already blossoming someplace else. That's the reason why grandparents are so important. That's the reason why aunts and uncles are so important. Coaches and teachers are so important. And now we're going to talk about Roadmap to a Full Ride. Why anyone should follow this, because the first person she experimented on was her own flesh and blood. Tell us about that story.
Yeah, so we recognized very early on, my husband and I, that Malik was gifted. Yeah, crying on cue at 18 months old in a TV show. We were like, this is unbelievable. So pretty much we were able to tap into and recognize his gifts very early on. And so the acting piece was just one particular piece where we were trying to make sure he was operating in his gifts. But as life went on, we realized that he was an academic child as well. He loved math, he loved reading, he could carry on conversations with adults, no matter what they talked to him or asked him about. He was doing interviews, I believe, as early as 5 years old. People were interviewing him on TV and on the radio. And so just watching him dialogue and interact with people, we started realizing, oh, wow, like he uses big words, he can put his sentences and everything together. And so when he got to middle school, I started, well, my husband and I, but I kind of started working academically to see what track he would be on and what he needed to do to be successful. So he got into the Governor's STEM Academy for high school. So I was trying to make sure that he was competitively having those classes and credits and everything he needed to make sure he could present an awesome package when it was time to go to high school. So now we're in high school now. He ended up finishing with a 4.5 GPA, a 1440 SAT score, and a plethora of other academic, community service, blah, blah, blah accolades, which opened the door for a lot of opportunities. He applied to 16 colleges, got in 15 of them. Most of them were waivers just because everybody was running down behind him. The only school he didn't get into that he applied to was Yale, their loss. Uh, but
Wait
all
a
the
minute, wait a
rest of
minute,
the
wait a minute.
schools
Let's say that this again. The only school out of 16 schools that we're looking at
he
that he
applied to.
applied for was Yale. Wait a minute, Yale. Just remember, when you watch the story of Malik Hawkins, you turn around to whoever turned him down and do what the NFL coaches do. Fire them before the end of the season. I'm just saying.
So yeah, but he definitely God has a plan, and so he definitely ended up where he was supposed to. But basically, in 2019, when it was all said and done, 4.5 GPA, 1440 SAT score, all these other accolades, 15 college acceptances, and a 1.2 million dollars in scholarship offerings from all of the schools he had applied to. He made national news, and at that point, my phone was ringing, phone DMs on social media and everything, and that's when I was like, okay, Keisha, you really do need to help parents understand what's out there, what they can do for their kids. This is not just my kid that can accomplish these things. And so I kind of kicked it into gear. But now that I was able to step away and retire from my full time job, I'm now able to really give this all of my attention. So Malik was my first client, my first non paying client.
All right.
And he's doing phenomenal at North Carolina A&T. He's now a junior, second semester junior, is doing wonderful things at A&T in Greensboro.
Can you tell us? I'm going to ask two more questions regarding Malik, and I'll move on and come back to Roadmap.
Okay.
What other colleges accepted Malik, and why did he choose North Carolina A&T, which is part of historically Black colleges and universities, the one
Right,
of the
right.
seven one? Why did he pick a Black college?
So that's a two-part answer. So he had a lot of acceptances. So maybe I'll narrow it down to
Just three or
his
four.
top five, what he made his top four. Okay. So his top four were High Point University, University of Miami, I believe it was, um, North Carolina A&T, of course, and Georgia Tech. Those were like his top four. There was a fifth one. I can't remember what the other school was. And so, to be quite honest, just being totally honest, is that's pretty much who I am. Originally, Malik did not think he was going to be going to an HBCU, although me and my husband both graduated from Norfolk State University, Behold the Green and Gold, which is a HBCU. And we talked about HBCUs in our household because Malik went to a predominantly white high school where HBCUs weren't emphasized or talked about as much. He kind of thought a PWI was where he needed to be. And because we are the parents we are, we allowed him to maneuver and figure out where he thought he needed to be and what he wanted to do and where he wanted to apply when he presented to us. And it made sense as to why he was applying to these places. But I still told him, you still have to apply to a couple of HBCUs. So once it all came down to it, he picked his top five. North Carolina A&T was the only HBCU that he was strongly considering. When all of the scholarships were in, all the cards were on the table, he had to make a decision. And at that particular point, North Carolina A&T rolled out the red carpet for him. He was the cream of the crop, and that's what they wanted to have on their campus. They made it impossible to say no. And so at that particular juncture, the decision was his, but he knew we were not signing for any loans. And we were not going to stroke a check for the difference in any scholarship money he had received from anywhere else. So North Carolina A&T is where he ended up, and I strongly believe that is where he was supposed to be. 1 week after he got on campus, we got a phone call from our 17-year-old who was 4 hours away from home saying, "Ma, Dad, we're thinking what's wrong." He was like, "This is one of the best decisions I have ever made in my life." So he is Aggie pride till he dies. He absolutely loves his HBCU. And to see how he's grown and flourished and the opportunities he's been afforded being at A&T are is just amazing. Period.
Yes, I've watched his social media, and I've had what do they call back office or backroom conversations with your son since he's been in school. And one of the things that I have said since I started this podcast, and since we've witnessed the loss of life of George Floyd and many others, and since we're surviving and thriving as people of color coming out of the pandemic, I still have this question. What if 80 to 90% of our academically gifted children, Black and brown, our academically gifted athletic children, took their talents to one of the 107 historically Black colleges and universities? What would the financial landscape and education look like if we all landed where we were recognized instead of going to an institution that celebrated them on Fridays and Saturdays and voted against their freedom and their independence 4 years after they graduated? So I want to commend you for laying that on the table. I want to commend your son for doing that. And I want to commend you for paying attention to detail and your dedication to empowering others, and your spirit for family in engagements. So
Thank you.
at in the sixth grade, when I'm sitting across from you, I also know that, I know children that are $250,000 in debt and that are school teachers. And I know that you don't have to take loans or go that much debt if you're going into the literary arts program. So trying to define who you want to be coming out of high school versus who you discover you actually want to be in majors. How do you have that conversation, and how does that apply to building a financial roadmap to a full ride?
So there are assessments out there that can help students and parents kind of figure out where they should land. It's kind of like you go through these questions and answers, and it says, well, you would be better off in the business field, or you would be better off in the engineering field. So I think using tools like that, as well as just paying attention to what their hobbies are, can kind of help you figure out where they're going to land as far as major is concerned. Um, but also, sometimes kids go to college undecided, and that's perfectly okay too, because sometimes you don't find yourself until you get there, or you think you like one thing, and you end up stumbling into something else. And so I think it's about being flexible, but also being intentional at the same time to ensure that our kids are kind of focused on what they're trying to do, and they're not just going to college because everybody's going. That's not a reason to go to college.
Right.
Or you're not jumping into a career field because that's what's popular. at the time, or you're not jumping into a career field because it pays a lot of money. Because you can get into a career field that pays a lot of money and you absolutely hate it. So I tell kids, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. So I think figuring out early on what you're passionate about can definitely help you narrow down what you might possibly want to major in and what you want to do when we say grow up, kind of what do you want to be when you grow up.
Yes.
So,
And to my listeners, I want you to understand the reason why Keisha Hawkins, the CEO of Roadmap to a Full Ride, is on this show is because of what I've always said. The people that follow and like, we're not looking for large numbers. We're looking for quality people. And when you talk
right.
about surrounding yourself with quality people, I have a commitment to the people that's in my circle. And Keisha Hawkins and her son are part of that circle. They call me up at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, I need you. I'm there. And vice versa. Everyone that's in my circle. So if you're following RMK Productions and Network on our YouTube page, then make sure you're one of those people with a higher calling that wants to get stuff done. This lady, even though we talk about this being a Black-owned business and this being a Black-owned company that's a podcast, this is an individual, no matter what the shade of your skin color is. If you desire a better life for your child, your grandchild, your niece, your nephew, whoever the person is responsible for laying out the roadmap to life, follow the roadmap to a full ride, because no matter what you may do with your secondary education, having the roadmap laid out for you to make the road a little easier for you when you don't have the financial struggle after you're deciding what you're going to really do in life, when you find out what the work field has provided for you, I need you to go back and pick up the phone, go to your computer, and reach out to Miss Keisha Hawkins. And how do they get in touch with you again?
So you can find anything you want, testimonials, my additional services, because I do offer other services outside of my core curriculum, which the core curriculum is everything possible about the whole college experience. But I also do coaching for interviews, for your college acceptance, as well as for scholarships. And I also do essay preparation, because everybody can't put their thoughts like they want to on paper. So I also offer that service as well. But you can go directly to my website, which is roadmap2fullride.com, roadmap2fullride.com. You can drop me in Google and just put in roadmap to a full ride and it'll come up. Or you can reach me by phone. And it's funny because I have not memorized my phone number yet. So I have to keep pulling it up. But it's 757-797-6049, 757-797-6049. And my email is info@roadmap2fullride.com. All that information is directly on my website. So if you can just get to my website, you can get any information you absolutely need.
Keisha Hawkins, you are a gift to this world, and I think the world
Thank
needs to
you.
give something back to you. And I ask this for a lot of my guests. I say 90%, not 100%, don't deserve this ask, but 90% of the people that I have on my show, I ask this: if you had one ask, ASK, and I'm going to say
Mhm.
ask it big, all right? Because God's sake, you should ask, you will receive. So
Hmm.
what your one ask be? And don't say sitting beside Oprah Winfrey, because those chairs are full.
No,
Go to dinner
no,
with her.
no. I think if I had a big ask, my ask would probably be to be able to get a contract with the school system, maybe in different states. Because my clientele is not just in Virginia, where I'm located. Most of my clientele, honestly, is outside of Virginia. And I do my consultations via telecom or Zoom or Google Meets. Or at other times before COVID, I was still moving around a little bit, which I still do locally. I've been doing workshops and things here. And I would be willing to travel somewhere else if the price is right. We could discuss all of that, to go into other states and host workshops and seminars and things of that nature. So I think if I had a major ask, it would probably be the opportunity to be able to get a contract with the school systems in different states, because this information really that I'm sharing should be done by guidance counselors, but we know they're overwhelmed because of various reasons, even stuff happening prior to COVID. And so when I do my one-on-one consultations with clients, they often say, I've never heard this before. I'm covering different stuff in my sessions. I've never heard this. I've never heard that. And so there's so much information that is out here that parents just don't know, students just don't know, resources that are available. And that's why having someone like me, an expert that can walk you through the process and help you alleviate possibly coming out of college with $120,000 plus worth of debt. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're doing in-state tuition, it could be a little less, but typically 30,000 is what it costs per year to go to a traditional 4-year institution. So you're looking at $120,000 before a child even gets a job offer, which is going to affect their debt to income ratio, what kind of house they can afford to buy, what apartment, a complex they can live in, where they can afford to shop for groceries, what kind of car they can buy. So I mean, the process goes on and on. So paying someone ahead of time who's very, very reasonable to help you get through the process and alleviate all of that. Because I say you're either going to pay one way or the other. You're going to pay someone like me to help you get through the process and let you know what all the tools are for your toolbox, what resources are out there, or you're going to pay on the back end with student loan that you're going to be paying for a very long time. So it's all about how you want to pay, on the front or on the back, but you're definitely going to pay.
That's all right. So to my listeners, and I say this all the time, I'm giving you big props. We have a higher call to action. You've heard Keisha Hawkins ask. There is someone out there or someone associated with someone out there. So when this video is in front of you or you're listening to it while you're driving to Starbucks on your way to work or in between breaks, I want you to see if you can connect Miss Keisha Hawkins with someone that has a higher call to action, that it either can grant her to a conversation with an administrative board or a school board, or even on the academic level on the college of setting this up, as many colleges have direct connections within the communities of the cities that they serve. And to be able to sit down with Miss Hawkins and map out a career path that provides opportunity for every young child. Because no child, when they talk about no child should be left behind, it should not be a conversation just in order to get a vote. It should be a conversation that has action attached to it. So I want you to take this and share this video with RMK Productions on our YouTube page at Network, or if you need information, reach out to us at info@rmkproductions.net. The last thing that I want to ask you before we close is, what do you want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
I want our listeners to take away the fact that there is help available, and that just because you as a parent may have had student loan debt, or your parents had student loan debt, that is not something that our children also have to have. And to know that there's someone who cares. I'm not doing this because I'm just trying to make a dollar, because honestly, I'm not charging very much for my services. I
It's
am actually, go ahead. Go ahead.
I
What are you
was
about
going
to
to
say?
say it is okay, and we do this as people of color. It is okay to be rewarded for your kindness and your efforts. We constantly provide content without being compensated for us. That's not the way commerce works. Okay, you provide the content, people pay you for the access to it. You've worked long and hard in your career. You should be
True.
rewarded for your efforts. So don't downplay the opportunities that you're providing someone, because if one from my children already being in and out of the system and graduated, I would be the first person lining up to sit down there and pay you what you're worth. If I can prevent my son or daughter from pushing a broom or mop, and there's nothing wrong with that, or flipping a burger just because that's their only option, and they could be the owner of that burger joint, I'd rather have my son or daughter learn how to be an entrepreneur and not have the stress and strain of the burden of paying back a bill that never gets paid, and they don't and does not allow them a credit rating which will provide them a life of comfort. You're worth it, Miss Hawkins. You're worth it. Don't sell yourself short. And people, pay this lady. I'm saying
Thank
pay
you.
her. Pay her.
Thank you.
Otherwise, at 34 years of age, your son or daughter will still be sleeping on your couch with their husband or boy or
Oh
wife.
Lord,
Hey,
let's hope not.
I'm painting the picture. I know people that still live at home with their parents. So I just want to thank you, and I want to thank my listeners. I made a little light of some situations, but I want to, instead of the trolls coming after me for what I said, I want you to listen to what Mrs. Hawkins said. She's got proven and predictable patterns of behavior that have allowed her son to reap the rewards and many other people to reap the rewards and find out how you get to the road to have a full ride. And thank you. And as my grandfather said, when you get to a position that you can help someone else, it is your duty to do so. Reach one, teach one. And now I fade to black. Thank you.